Mr. Chairman, thank you, Secretary Wright, for coming. I appreciate it, seeing you today. I want to ask some questions about transmission and the grid. In your first secretarial order, you committed to use all lawful authorities to strengthen the grid, including the backbone of our transmission system. Since 2005, FERC has had the authority to act as the sole permitting agency for large multi-state transmission lines that your department deems to be in the national interest, but the federal government has not once used this authority due to litigation and endless bureaucracy regarding DOE's role in the process. That's Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden never used the authority. The backstop permitting authority for transmission is also a fraction of the authority that FERC has long had over natural gas pipelines and LNG, which always get their one-stop permitting shop at FERC. So my question is, would you support bipartisan efforts in Congress to streamline this permit authority for large transmission lines, including would you be supportive of establishing permitting parity at FERC between natural gas and transmission?
Absolutely. The United States needs to build more energy infrastructure of all kinds, and certainly including transmission lines.
Okay. And I agree with my colleagues that we're walking into a reliability and affordability crisis. And I think to the extent that's because right now our grid is planned in a way that's segmented, costly, and inefficient. The various regions across the country have no incentive to work together or ensure that we're meeting load growth in the most efficient and cost-effective way. Last year, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, released a study showing that an additional 35 gigawatts of interregional transfer capacity, which are grid connections among regions, would make the grid more resilient against extreme weather, with lower costs, and enable us to meet load growth. The study also says that building interregional transmission maximizes the use of energy resources, including peaker plants like natural gas, by enabling regions to send power where it's abundant to where it's most needed. Do you agree with the results of that study, and what can you do with the department to help build more interregional transmission infrastructure and use DOE authorities to build more interregional transmission?
Look, so I can't speak to the specifics in that study. I do read a lot about this, studies, but I can't comment on that one. But yeah, are we better off with more?
Sometimes known as the SEAM study. You might have heard it that way.
Yeah. Look, there's no doubt that our country and our grid would benefit from more transmission. And it is a subject of active study and discussion at the DOE. The problem, as you know, the historical record of building transmission is just deathly long, incredibly hard. NEPA and environmental protests have made it more than a decade to build anything. Very frustrating. We're working on that. We'd love to get that faster. And in the meantime, we're also working on things to take existing right-of-ways and either have dynamic rating on lines. They have a certain maximum power they can put through, but it depends on temperature and wind speed.
Don't disagree with any of that. I think, actually, I'm working on NEPA right now myself because I agree with you. But the issue I'm raising is the lack of incentive among regions to cooperate with each other to build transmission that I think undisputedly would make our system more reliable and offer lower costs for consumers. And what I would love to get is the opportunity to work with you, get your commitment that that's something you want to do, and that you would work with us on a bipartisan approach to getting that done.
Would love to work with you. Would love to. And you're right, not just in the interregional transmission, but there's a lot of just the wrong incentives in our electricity grid because of the regulatory environment. So I look forward to working with you on a bipartisan basis to figure out how to make electricity easier to move and cheaper to buy.
All right, and also I think we have some different understanding of the facts of the production of energy. I just wanted to say the U.S. produced record oil and gas in 2023, more than we've ever produced before. We always thought it was an irony that we produced more oil and gas under Biden and more renewables than under Trump, and more renewables under Trump than we produced under Biden. And in fact, electricity production is up about 5% over the last 5 years. We know we got to do more electricity production. And the one thing I would just say, you mentioned a concern about investors losing their investment in energy because of a change in government policy and maybe the government should reimburse them. We're about to do just that. There's 2,600 gigawatts of energy lined up to get connected. About 90% of that is non-emitting, what we call clean energy. And they depend on these, many of the tax incentives that have been laid out in existing law. And I think the administration is proposing not to phase those out, but just to cut them off. And a lot of that energy won't be realized because of that. I assume you're not suggesting we pay those people for changing the law, like you just said.
No, the subsidies for wind
If you
wind
could
power,
answer
the
the
production.
gentleman's, he's out of time. If you do in about 10 seconds, that'd be great.
Yeah. Those subsidies are decades old. We absolutely should get rid of them as soon as possible.
We're changing the law and hurting investors, like you said you were concerned about.
It's removing subsidies. It's not
The,
preventing construction.
It's current law.
The gentleman's time has expired.